The email hit me like a physical blow, a cold, hard fact laid bare on the screen. My hands trembled as I read the auction house confirmation again. The family menorah, the one that had sat on our mantelpiece for generations, the one my great-grandmother carried across an ocean, was gone. Sold. Not lost, not stolen by a stranger, but sold by my own cousin David. He was the only other person with the key to my grandmother's old house, the house where I kept it safe, believing it was protected. The weight of that betrayal was immense, a heavy stone in my gut. It wasn't just a piece of metal, it was years of stories, of light, of Hanukkah celebrations, of every single one of us touching it, feeling its history. I called David, my voice tight, barely holding it together. He answered, sounding surprisingly cheerful. "David," I started, trying to keep my voice even. "The menorah, it's been sold." There was a pause, a beat of silence that stretched into an eternity. Then, his laugh, light and dismissive. "Oh, that old thing? Yeah, I put it up for auction. Needed the money more than you needed an old candlestick gathering dust." My breath caught. An old candlestick? This wasn't some trinket from a garage sale. This was our history, our connection. He went on, "Look, it just sat there. And honestly, the market for antiques is pretty good right now. Think of it as an investment for me." His words were like little knives, each one twisting deeper. He didn't understand. He couldn't. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange calm settled over me, a quiet, cold resolve. I just listened to his casual indifference, letting his words sink in, knowing that something fundamental had shifted. The news spread like wildfire through our small community. Not from me, I hadn't said a word to anyone but David. But somehow the whisper started. Maybe it was the auction house's public listing, or maybe someone saw it. Whatever it was, the news reached everyone who mattered, everyone who knew the menorah's story, everyone who remembered it shining bright in our windows each Hanukkah. The backlash against David was swift and unexpected. People stopped calling him. Invitations to community events, usually a given, suddenly dried up. He was a familiar face, but now he was met with averted gazes and hushed conversations whenever he appeared. A few days later, I overheard Mrs. Goldstein, a woman who knew our family for 60 years, tell someone loudly enough for David to hear, "Some things are worth more than money." Her words echoed what I felt, but couldn't bring myself to say. David's initial smugness, his confident dismissal of my feelings, started to crack. I saw him at the bakery, usually a place where he held court, looking lost, his face pale, glancing around as if expecting someone to confront him. The dawning panic in his eyes was almost visible. He was starting to understand that he had miscalculated, that he had broken something, not just between us, but within the entire community. He had sold more than an object. He had sold a piece of our shared soul. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. My story and the story of that menorah really began long before David's betrayal. I grew up in a small, tight-knit Jewish community, not in the bustling cities most people imagine, but in a quiet town nestled by rolling hills, where traditions were not just customs, but the very fabric of our lives. Our neighborhood was a mosaic of old stone houses, each with a mezuzah on the doorpost, and the scent of challah baking seemed to perpetually hang in the air, especially on Fridays. Everyone knew everyone, and family lines were as intertwined as the threads in a prayer shawl. Sundays were for visiting grandparents, Saturdays for synagogue, and every holiday was a communal affair, celebrated with songs, stories, and mountains of food. From a very young age, I was steeped in it all. My grandmother, ZL, was the keeper of our family's history, and she made sure I understood the weight and beauty of our heritage. She'd tell me stories of our ancestors, of their struggles and triumphs, always circling back to the symbols that connected us across generations. The menorah was central to these tales. It wasn't just metal, it was a beacon, a reminder of miracles, of light in darkness, of perseverance. Hanukkah, in particular, was magical. The flickering candles, the warmth of family gathered around, the quiet prayers, it all felt sacred. I remember sitting on my grandmother's lap, her gnarled fingers tracing the intricate patterns on the menorah, her voice soft as she whispered its history, each scratch and dent a memory etched into its brass. She taught me that our traditions were not relics of the past, but living, breathing connections to who we were and who we would become. I dreamed of carrying that forward. I envisioned my own children and their children gathered around that same menorah, their faces illuminated by its light, hearing the same stories. My deepest desire was to preserve that unbroken chain, to be a bridge between the past and the future, ensuring that the spiritual warmth and communal strength it represented would never fade. It was more than just a dream. It was a calling, a profound sense of responsibility passed down through generations. The menorah was the heart of that dream, a tangible link to everything I held dear. David, my cousin, was always part of this picture, though his path diverged from ours over time. He was a few years older, charismatic, and initially he seemed just as invested in our family's traditions as anyone else. We spent countless holidays together, lighting the menorah, spinning dreidels until our fingers ached, and sharing stories by the fire. He was an integral part of my childhood, a trusted companion in all our family rituals. But even then, there were subtle differences. He was always a little more restless, a little more interested in the outside world, in things that glittered and promised instant gratification. He'd often joke about the old ways, but back then it felt like playful teasing, not a sign of deeper detachment. As we grew older, his visits to synagogue became less frequent, his participation in family gatherings more performative. He'd still show up for Hanukkah, but his eyes would often be on his phone, or he'd make a quick exit after the candle lighting, claiming other plans. We all noticed, of course, but family is family. We hoped he'd come back around, that the roots of our shared heritage would eventually pull him back into the fold. We saw him as a temporary wanderer, not someone who would ever actively sever ties, let alone sell off a piece of our collective soul. His gradual drift away from our values, from the very essence of what made our family, was a slow burn, a quiet withdrawal that none of us truly understood until it was too late. He was still family, still at our table, but a subtle distance had grown, a quiet chasm that made his eventual act of betrayal, though shocking, almost understandable in hindsight. The small cracks in our relationship with David started showing long before the menorah incident. Looking back, I can see a pattern, a slow erosion of trust and respect that built up over years. It wasn't one big fight, but a series of small, almost invisible slights that chipped away at the foundation of our bond. He'd often make promises he wouldn't keep, especially when it came to family matters. There was the time he swore he'd help organize the annual Passover Seder, a huge undertaking that required weeks of planning. He showed up an hour before guests arrived, offering vague excuses about work, leaving my mother and me scrambling to finish everything. He laughed it off, saying, "Relax, it's just food," completely missing the point that it was about tradition, about shared responsibility. Then there were the subtle humiliations. When I started teaching at the community Hebrew school, a job I loved and felt deeply connected to, he'd make offhand comments at family dinners. "Still playing teacher, are we?" he'd say, with a smirk, as if my dedication to our heritage was some childish hobby. He'd compare my modest salary to his own growing success in business, making me feel small, as if my contributions to the community were less valuable because they weren't measured in dollars. It wasn't direct criticism, but it cut deep, especially coming from family. He never quite understood that some things held value beyond money. He had a way of dismissing my feelings too. I remember sharing my excitement about a new program I was developing for the synagogue, something to engage younger families. I was passionate about it, poured hours into the planning. He listened, nodded, then said, "Sounds like a lot of effort for something nobody really cares about anymore." It was like a cold splash of water, designed to deflate my enthusiasm. He'd do this often, subtly undermining my efforts to keep our traditions alive, painting them as old-fashioned or irrelevant. It felt like he was trying to push me away from the very things that defined us. His manipulation was even more jarring. There was a period when our grandmother was ill, and we were all trying to manage her care. David, being the eldest cousin, took charge of some of her financial affairs. He assured us he was looking out for her best interests. But later, we found out he'd invested a significant portion of her savings in one of his risky ventures without consulting anyone. When confronted, he just shrugged. "She gave me permission, and it's for her future, isn't it?" He always had an answer, a way to twist things to his advantage, making it seem like he was doing us a favor. He saw opportunities where we saw responsibilities. Later, when our parents were considering selling a small piece of land that had been in the family for generations, David was the loudest voice pushing for the sale. He argued it was dead money, that it could be put to better use. He presented spreadsheets, talked about market values, and convinced them it was the smart financial move. We, the other cousins, felt a pang of loss. It was a place where we'd had family picnics, where memories were made. But David's arguments were always framed as logical, practical, and everyone else's as sentimental and unrealistic. He made us feel naive for wanting to hold on to something that didn't generate immediate profit. These incidents, small as they might seem individually, accumulated over time. They built a wall between us, brick by brick. It became clear that David saw the world through a different lens, one where personal gain and short-term profit outweighed sentiment, tradition, and even family loyalty. He was always looking for the angle, the way to benefit himself, often at the expense of others, or at least at the expense of what others held dear. The sale of the menorah, therefore, was not a sudden, out-of-character act. It was the culmination of years of this behavior, the final, most painful manifestation of his growing detachment and disregard for everything our family stood for. It was a betrayal, yes, but one that, in hindsight, had been brewing for a very long time. The emotional atmosphere in our family became increasingly strained. It wasn't just David's actions, but the way they started to affect everyone else. Discussions about family decisions turned into battlegrounds. Simple things like choosing a date for a holiday gathering or deciding on a charity donation in our grandparents' name became opportunities for David to push his own agenda. He'd argue for the cheapest option or the one that benefited him in some indirect way, always framing it as the most sensible choice. His dismissive attitude grew into something more open, more confrontational. He started questioning the need for certain traditions at all, calling them outdated and expensive. He'd say things like, "Why do we need a big Seder every year? Can't we just do something small? Or what's the point of spending so much on the synagogue when we could be investing that money?" His absence from family gatherings became more frequent, and when he did show up, he was often late, distracted, or openly critical. He'd sit at the table, scrolling on his phone, barely engaging in conversations, making it clear he'd rather be anywhere else. This was a man who grew up looking forward to these events, who understood their importance. Now, he acted like they were a burden. He'd openly question the value of our shared heritage, not just to me, but to anyone who would listen. He'd challenge our cousins, our aunts and uncles, asking them why they clung to old ways when the world was moving forward. It created an uncomfortable silence, a tension that hung heavy in the air every time he spoke. People started to avoid making eye contact, afraid of being the next target of his practical yet hurtful logic. I felt an increasing weight of unspoken judgments from neighbors and relatives. It wasn't just our immediate family who noticed David's changes, it was the entire community. Our community was small, and everyone knew everyone else's business. When David started openly neglecting family gatherings, missing important community events, and even making thinly veiled criticisms about our traditions to others, people talked. I'd catch snippets of conversations, hushed whispers when I walked by, or sympathetic glances that spoke volumes. It made me feel like I was failing somehow to keep our family together, to uphold the image of unity that was so important in our culture. The pressure was immense. It felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to smooth things over, trying to explain away David's behavior to others without betraying him completely. But there was only so much I could do. The discord was becoming too obvious to ignore. I remember one Shabbat, after services, an older woman from the community, Mrs. Goldstein, approached me. She didn't say anything direct about David, but she looked at me with such sorrow in her eyes and simply said, "A family is like a tree, my dear. Its roots must be strong, or it will wither." Her words were gentle, but they hit me hard. They confirmed that the cracks in our family were visible to everyone, and that the community was starting to worry. This period was the peak of my emotional suffocation. I felt trapped between my loyalty to David, my desire to preserve our family's reputation, and the growing frustration with his actions. I wanted to confront him, to make him see the damage he was doing, but every attempt was met with a brick wall of indifference or a clever deflection. He turned it back on me, accusing me of being too emotional, too traditional, too resistant to change. He'd say I was the one creating problems by making a big deal out of nothing. It made me doubt myself, question whether I was truly overreacting, even though every fiber of my being told me I wasn't. The mounting tension was unbearable. It felt like a constant knot in my stomach. The joy I once found in our traditions started to feel tainted by the underlying conflict. Every holiday, every family gathering was overshadowed by the looming possibility of another argument, another dismissive comment from David. It wasn't just about the words anymore, it was about the feeling, the atmosphere that his presence or his absence created. It was the feeling of a family, once so close and united, slowly but surely drifting apart, pulled by the currents of one person's ambition and disregard. I knew, deep down, that something had to give. This couldn't go on forever. The breaking point felt inevitable, just a matter of when and how. And I dreaded it, even as I secretly wished for it, hoping that whatever came next would finally bring some clarity, some resolution to the suffocating tension that had become our daily lives. Their breaking point arrived, not with a quiet whimper, but with a public, echoing crash. It was during a local charity auction, an event David often attended, seeing it as an opportunity to network. I was there too, mostly out of habit and a sense of community duty. The auctioneer, a jovial man named Mr. Henderson, was presenting a particularly interesting lot. He held up an item and my breath caught in my throat. It was our family menorah, gleaming under the bright lights, looking strangely out of place on the stage. My heart pounded. David had sold it. Not just sold it, but put it into a public auction. The revelation wasn't just that he sold it, it was how he sold it. Mr. Henderson, trying to drum up bids, started talking about the menorah's history, mentioning a few things David must have told him. He spoke of its age, its unique craftsmanship, and then, in an attempt to add more allure, he blurted out a detail that sent a cold shiver down my spine. He said something about it being owned by a family who fled persecution, carrying it across borders, a symbol of their resilience and a secret hidden within its base. My mind reeled. The secret he spoke of was a family story, a deeply personal piece of our past that was never meant for public ears. It was a story about how my great-grandparents, in their desperate escape, had hidden a small, coded message inside the menorah's base, a message of hope and survival meant only for their descendants. The room went quiet for a moment, then a buzz started. People weren't just looking at the menorah anymore, they were looking at me, then at David, who was trying to look nonchalant but was clearly uncomfortable. He had exposed a long-hidden family secret, not out of malice perhaps, but out of sheer disregard, using it as a selling point. The shame washed over me in waves. It wasn't just about the menorah anymore. It was about the desecration of our history, the public airing of something sacred. David, in his haste to make money, had not only betrayed our trust, but had also trampled on the memory of our ancestors. Sitting there, watching the bids climb, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The suffocating tension, the unspoken judgments, David's dismissive attitude. It all culminated in this moment of profound public humiliation. I knew then that I couldn't let this stand. I couldn't continue to silently endure his actions. This wasn't just about preserving a tradition, it was about reclaiming our family's honor, defining what was truly important. The cycle of suffering, of quietly accepting his slights, had to end. I had to break it. A definitive decision formed in my mind. I would publicly reclaim the menorah's legacy, not just for myself, but for my ancestors, for the community, and for the generations to come. I would make sure its true story, the one David had so carelessly exposed, was told with the respect and dignity it deserved. As if on cue, an unexpected opportunity arose. After the auction, as I was trying to compose myself, a man approached me. He introduced himself as Dr. Elias Vance, a local historian specializing in Jewish artifacts. He had been in the audience, drawn by Mr. Henderson's intriguing, if clumsy, description of the menorah. Dr. Vance looked genuinely concerned. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said, his voice gentle. "That menorah, its story, it sounds remarkable. If what was said about a hidden message is true, it could be incredibly significant. I'd be honored to help you uncover its full history, to document its true value." His words were a lifeline. They offered a path forward, a way to transform this public shame into a powerful testament to our heritage. I looked at him, then back at the empty stage where our menorah had just been sold, and a flicker of hope ignited within me. The truth, the deeper truth behind its value, was finally going to be exposed, and I would be the one to tell it. The days following the auction were a blur of raw emotion. Grief, sharp and unexpected, settled deep in my chest. It wasn't just about the menorah itself, but about the public airing of our family's most private story, the secret message meant only for us. Shame burned hot on my cheeks, a constant flush I couldn't seem to shake. Every glance from a neighbor, every hushed conversation felt like a judgment. I imagined them dissecting our family, picking apart David's callousness and my own perceived failure to protect our heritage. The fear of what people thought, of how this scandal would forever mark us, was a heavy weight. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if a vital piece of my soul had been laid bare for everyone to scrutinize. Then a lifeline appeared in an unexpected form. Mrs. Goldstein, a wise, elderly woman from our synagogue, approached me. She had known my grandparents, had seen the menorah lit every Hanukkah for decades. Her eyes, usually twinkling with mischief, were now soft with understanding. "Child," she said, her voice raspy but firm, "what is done in the dark always comes to light. And sometimes, light is what we need to see clearly." She didn't offer pity, but a quiet strength. She spoke of resilience, of how our ancestors had faced far worse and still found ways to keep their traditions alive. She became an anchor in my storm, offering not just comfort, but practical advice, reminding me of the community's deeper values beyond gossip. But not everyone was so supportive. My cousin Rachel, whose family had always been a bit more concerned with appearances, called me. Her voice was tight, laced with thinly veiled criticism. "This whole thing is a mess," she'd said. "A family secret, out in the open. What will people say? It reflects badly on all of us." Other distant relatives, influenced by the swirling rumors and the community's strong emphasis on reputation, kept their distance. Their silence, more than any harsh words, felt like a betrayal. They weren't openly hostile, but their withdrawal was a clear sign of their disapproval, adding another layer of pain to my already bruised spirit. The cultural dynamics of our community played a crucial role in how this whole situation unfolded. Our community values family reputation above almost everything else. Harmony, unity, and respect for elders and tradition are the cornerstones of our social fabric. David's actions and the subsequent public exposure of our secret were seen as a direct affront to these values. The initial shock quickly gave way to a complex mix of reactions. Some, like Mrs. Goldstein, understood the deeper spiritual meaning behind the menorah and rallied around me, seeing it as a test of our collective faith and resilience. They understood that the menorah wasn't just metal, it was history, memory, and hope forged into an object. They saw David's act as a desecration, and my efforts to reclaim its legacy as an act of courage. Others, however, were more concerned with the disruption, the scandal. They saw the public auction, the historian's involvement, and the emerging story as an unnecessary spectacle that brought unwanted attention to our quiet community. They valued peace and an untroubled exterior above all else. This division, this quiet tension within the community, was a new challenge. I had to navigate not only my own grief and shame, but also the varied expectations and judgments of those around me. Dr. Vance, the historian, became an unexpected bridge. His academic interest in the menorah's historical significance helped shift some of the focus from scandal to scholarship. He began to explain to community leaders that this was not just a family squabble, but a chance to uncover an important piece of Jewish history, a testament to survival. His calm, respectful approach started to slowly turn the tide, moving the conversation from gossip to genuine historical inquiry. This unexpected ally was helping me transform shame into a sense of purpose. The journey of rebuilding began with quiet determination. Dr. Vance, with his meticulous research, became an invaluable partner. Together, we delved into archives, old community records, and family documents, piecing together the menorah's true story. It wasn't just a family heirloom, it was a testament to survival, a relic that had traveled across continents, bearing witness to centuries of our people's history. Each discovery, each verified detail, chipped away at the shame, replacing it with a profound sense of pride. We worked tirelessly, transforming the narrative from a scandal into a powerful story of resilience and heritage. The historian's findings resonated deeply within the community, especially with those who had initially been skeptical. He presented his research at community gatherings, painting a vivid picture of the menorah's journey, its symbolic power, and the hands that had carefully guarded it through generations of upheaval. This public education was crucial. It allowed people to see beyond the personal drama and appreciate the deeper significance of what had almost been lost. As for David, the consequences of his actions were stark and unavoidable. His initial financial gain from the menorah sale proved to be a hollow victory. The community's reaction, though not overtly aggressive, was a powerful form of ostracization. People simply stopped engaging with him. Invitations to family gatherings and communal events dried up. His calls went unanswered. His presence in the synagogue was met with quiet nods, but no real conversation. It wasn't a formal banishment, but a slow, suffocating social exclusion. He became an outsider, not just for selling the menorah, but for the careless way he had exposed our family secret, and, more importantly, for disrespecting the very fabric of our shared heritage. He tried to brush it off, to pretend it didn't affect him, but the isolation was clear for everyone to see. His business, which relied heavily on community trust and connections, began to falter. Clients, sensing the shift in community sentiment, slowly drifted away. The financial gain he'd sought was quickly overshadowed by the profound loss of his reputation and standing. He had traded something priceless for a temporary comfort, and now he was paying the real price. After months of dedicated work, the menorah's full history was documented. It was a story of hope, resilience, and unwavering faith. The community, led by Mrs. Goldstein and other respected elders, decided that the menorah should be returned to a place of honor. It was not placed back in my private home, but rather it was entrusted to the community's care, displayed prominently in the synagogue's small historical exhibit. This decision was a powerful symbol of collective healing and a renewed commitment to our shared past. It became a focal point, a tangible reminder of our history and the strength we found in unity. During the next Hanukkah, the menorah was lit with a special ceremony, not just by my family, but by members of the entire community. It was a poignant moment, a silent acknowledgement of the pain, the struggle, and the ultimate triumph. Standing there, watching the flames dance, I reflected on the hidden spiritual power of the menorah. It wasn't just an object of silver and brass. It was a vessel of memory, a beacon of light that had guided my ancestors through darkness. Its true value wasn't in its material worth, but in the stories it carried, the traditions it represented, and the connection it forged between generations. This whole ordeal, as painful as it had been, had forced us to confront our vulnerabilities and reaffirm our values. It had taught me that resilience wasn't just about enduring hardship, but about actively reclaiming what was lost, rebuilding what was broken, and finding strength in community. The menorah, now a shared treasure, became a symbol of our enduring spirit, a testament to the triumph of spiritual values over material greed. It was a powerful reminder that some things, like heritage and faith, are truly priceless, and their light, once almost extinguished, could shine brighter than ever before. The community, once fractured, had found its way back to a stronger, more unified path.